like for real right now?
At this current moment, a little anxious, a little stressed, happy and relieved, but tense.
Is there anything you do consistently to kind of get rid of that like tense feeling in your body? Like anything that helps?
Distraction, breathing, realizing like, okay, you've been in much worse situations than this, like you'll be fine. Understanding why. I think one of the biggest things about me and like my anxiety is like understanding it, which is something I didn't for a very long time.
Let's take it back to a time that maybe you didn't understand why or didn't understand what the root of the anxiety was. Can you tell me what your experience in school was like?
School was never really my favorite place. I never totally felt like I fit in, and it was just nothing about school was ever something I was just like, I'm super good at this. I really love and enjoy being here. It was always like a place I wasn't totally comfortable. I was a really shy kid unless it came to anything involving with music. And I definitely didn't love sleeping out, so I definitely had that little shred of anxiety in my body, which I didn't know like at the time, like, oh, little girl doesn't like to sleep out. It's just like she misses home. I never like was like, oh, there's this thing, it's called anxiety. I have that.
And can you tell me your first memory with having a panic attack?
I was 12 years old, and I was in the 7th grade. I was in class, and there was a boy next to me, and all of a sudden he got up and beat up the teacher. And I immediately started freaking out, grabbed my backpack, and ran to the nearest bathroom I could find, was hysterically crying, hyperventilating, my heart was racing, shaking, and I went into the bathroom, I closed the door, I locked myself in a stall, had my feet up so nobody knew I was in there, and I had the lights out, and I texted my mom about 1,000 times saying, I need you, I feel like I'm dying, something's wrong, come pick me up right now, like 911, it's urgent. And like right now I just see in my head like with my feet up on the stall, like so no one could find me. And then eventually my mom got there, like she was like with somebody from the school like trying to find me, and I didn't want to make a sound because I didn't want anyone to find me like other than her. So then after that day, almost every single day after that, I would wait outside of school with her and try and go back in for months, and was never able to continue school there. So I was homeschooled for the rest of the 7th grade year. And then I went back for 8th grade and definitely had my hard times. And I just, after that, really realized like school really wasn't the place for me. I tried again in 9th grade for a couple of months, and then I finally convinced my parents to allow me to be homeschooled, which definitely was not something that was conventional, especially in the town I grew up in. Everything is very show the best, hide the rest, and I did something very unconventional, and there were very, very many people that made comments about it and told me to my face and told my parents like, oh, you're ruining her life letting her be homeschooled. And I was like, no, actually my life is only okay because they're allowing me to be homeschooled. When I couldn't go to school for the first time, we sought out help from a therapist who's actually my therapist to this day. At first I didn't really understand why I couldn't go to school, and like I didn't understand like what being nervous was or what anxiety was, and I was like, oh my god, like there's something wrong with me, like nobody could know. So all of my friends that would be like, why didn't you come to school today? Why didn't you come to my birthday party? I would just make up excuse after excuse because I was so afraid like people would think I was crazy because I had this thing called anxiety, which I had never heard of before, and nobody in the town that I grew up in ever spoke of anything other than being so unnaturally perfect. I would be like, oh, I had an orthodontist appointment. I had family in from out of town. I would make up every excuse in the book of why I wouldn't be at school or why I couldn't go to a party, which ultimately in the long run made my anxiety much worse because I was keeping up with a lie. And the only people that actually knew about it were my parents, my brothers, my grandparents, and one of my best friends. And after a while, I ended up losing basically all of my friends except for that one. So the thing that I was trying to avoid by sharing the fact that I had anxiety was it had already happened, because parents weren't really into their kids hanging out with this girl that's being homeschooled for some strange reason that no one knew. Now it affects me because there were definitely developmental things, not going to high school or not going to college, or, you know, some other foundational things that I'm like, oh wait, there are certain like friendship and relationship things where I'm like, oh fuck, like I don't really know how to navigate that, because that's a gap of something that I missed when I had such bad anxiety. I was debilitated from going and doing things. I definitely grew up later than other kids my age, which now I feel like I'd say pretty much caught up and are at a same like experience level and, you know, maturity level as like other kids my age. But I also grew up really quickly, matured very quickly, because when I was being homeschooled, I was pursuing my music career. So I was in a lot of meetings and I matured in the business mind much quicker than all of my other peers did because they were in school. One of the best coping mechanisms that I have for myself till this day is distraction. Even play a game on my phone or listen to a song or something else. Or I know a lot of people, social media is triggering for them, but social media actually kind of helps because it's just such an extreme distraction. Distraction is probably one of the best tools that I use for myself, just to kind of like, okay, remove yourself from the situation for a second, stop thinking about it, and then come back with like fresh emotions and fresh mind. Songwriting is probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me. I had so many pent up feelings and so much pent up energy and like stress that I had nowhere to put it and nowhere to go. Like, yes, I was singing always, but I didn't understand how I could express myself and explain feelings. And especially today, like if I'm on the go or I have some sort of anxious feeling, like I immediately write it down in my notes, and I have thousands of notes. If I don't have the ability to write a song like right here and then, I write down like exactly the way I'm feeling. Like if there's any, you know, thing around me that's making me feel a certain way, like write down as much detail as I possibly can to try and, when I read it later on, put myself back into the exact way I was feeling before. Songwriting and distraction, I'd say, are probably the biggest thing. And also talking about it, talking to my therapist, talking to my mom. I do still have a little bit of a hard time talking to friends about it sometimes, just because it's like, that's something I was so against, because I was like, oh my God, they're gonna judge me, they're gonna leave, they're not gonna like me. So talking to friends about mental health or even dating things or stuff like that is hard for me sometimes. There are still certain things where I'm like, oh wait, don't share that. But then I'm like, why wouldn't I share that? Like, are my friends gonna judge me? If they are, then they shouldn't be my friends, type of thing. So I do definitely still struggle with that a little bit, but I've definitely gotten so much better at it over the years, just from, you know, being able to trust people. Trust is definitely something that's never come easily to me. I've written many songs about it, and I know there are a lot of people that it's not easy for, but trust is definitely something that's really important, and I try so hard to be able to trust the people that I surround myself with. But definitely my first person I always go to till this day is my therapist. It's taken me a really long time to be able to share anything about anxiety, because I was so against it at first, because I thought like there was something wrong with me. But as soon as Justin Bieber released his Purpose album, that was when I found out for the first time that I wasn't alone in feeling like this. Even though people tell you, like your therapist or your mom or your dad tell you like, oh, like you're not alone, like other people feel like this, you don't know until you either know somebody or somebody that you love that's like a public figure, like Justin Bieber, has anxiety or isn't perfect. And when he released Purpose, I realized like, wow, somebody I love so much and admire feels the same way I do. And so that's really when I also started writing music, and that was the catalyst that started my writing career as well. What really changed me from hiding everything versus now sharing it. And it definitely wasn't like a quick process, like, oh, he shared it, that means I can. It took many years. And I mean, this happened when I was 12 years old. I just turned 23.
So you just announced your EP like an hour ago. How does that feel, being the first step into sharing this more vulnerable side of yourself?
It feels really liberating, but also at the same time really fucking scary. I definitely had the words to say what I wanted to say, but I didn't have them in the right formation, if that makes sense. I feel like now I've really finally been able to put in to words the way I've always wanted to share this story, because it's not something that's like an everyday occurrence in somebody's life, and it's not something that, you know, I got over in a day. It took a really long time to be able to be okay and live a normal daily life. I feel like there's definitely a weight off my shoulder being able to be like, hi, like, I've dealt with this for a long time, and like, this is something that's so important to me, like more than almost anything in the whole world. The fact that like, who knows where I'd be right now and what I'd be doing if Justin didn't release that album. I know I'd be singing, but I don't know if I would have ever had the courage or the belief in myself to speak out about things that make me uncomfortable and give me, you know, anxiety.
What was the big turning point in your life, if there was one, where you felt like you really started to grow up and become who you are today, and since you were homeschooled and it wasn't traditional?
Going on tour. I feel like I had always been, you know, pretty shy, and over the years it definitely got better, but up until going on tour, I definitely felt like I was a little bit behind the other people my age, just in life a little bit. And going on tour, especially the first tour I went on, it was 2 months long. It was like that, where I just grew up and lived. It's almost as if I went to college, like 4 years packed into those 2 months. I'm a completely different person than the person I went on tour being. I mean, I learned that, like, you know, partying is fun sometimes, and like relationships with people are different than what I thought, and like I learned so much about friendship, I learned so much about myself, and I have this newfound confidence in almost like way I think of myself after tour, which I'm so grateful for. And I feel like going on tour was honestly the best thing that could have ever happened to me on that very first tour.
How are you feeling in your life day to day now with your mental health?
Well, for the most part, I'd say my mental health day to day is pretty good, but I'm the type of person that like, it could be fine at this current second, and literally like 2 seconds later it's like that, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm a mess, I'm anxious. I'm definitely a sensitive person, and it's one of the things I actually hated most about myself always growing up, is like, there are things that like affect me so deeply. Like, someone could say something to me and like, it could be to my face, like, oh, like blah blah blah, like that won't affect me at all. But it's the things that I find that are the unsaid things that I create the fake scenario of my own future in my head. It's like, if someone doesn't tell me what they're thinking, I'm going to come up with it, and it's probably not going to be the kindest thing. So it could change on the literally like with like the flip of a switch. But at this current moment, other than like the whole like stress of today, I'm doing really well. But who knows? Fingers crossed it stays for tomorrow. But I definitely have my days where I'm like, oh, I don't want to leave my bed, I'm so anxious. But I've been able to, over the years, develop coping mechanisms and other skills that allow me to live my everyday life, even when I have days like that. Because before, if I felt like shit, I sat in that feeling.
What is the best tip or advice you've gotten from your therapist?
I'd say one of the ones that I think about most days is like, and this is said with like so much love, and it's like, not everything is about you. Like, if you feel like somebody's off or something, like the chances of it being about you are like 0.01%. There are so many other things going on in people's lives that don't involve you. So if you feel like someone's energy is off or something else is going on, most likely it's not about you. I always jump to like the worst conclusions. I am, as my therapist says, I catastrophize everything, and I make everything much bigger than it needs to be. And I need to, you know, bring myself back down to earth a little bit and, you know, really assess the situation rather than just catastrophizing and going to like, oh, this is the end of the world. Like, in conversations with my therapist, like, one of the main lines is like, what if the sky falls down? What if I never make it out? Like, I go to the nth degree immediately. I need to just like take a step back, breathe, and be like, okay, is it really that deep? This is the point of why I've always wanted to make music, for one of the reasons. Like, this is why I started writing music, to write music like this, to help other people know that they're not alone, or that they're not crazy, like the way I thought I was so alone and I thought I was crazy for having these feelings. I think this is just the beginning of the music and all of the things that I do involving mental health and my anxiety and therapy. And I think it's so important that we continue to normalize it, because we're really getting somewhere. We have a lot to go, but if I was a 12-year-old girl right now going through what I was going through back then, I think I would be a lot better off knowing that this is a normal thing and everybody has their own thing. This one's just mine.